Thanks, Nolan. I'll kick off at a couple of minutes past.
Okay.
Jump there.
It's so good to see some of the old guys coming in.
Hi, Nolene.
Hey, Shadrach, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
We're not so old, Nolan.
I mean, old as in not this year's intake, last year's intake. Hi, Timmy. Who else has just joined us? Melissa.
Hi, Nolene. How are you?
So good. Welcome.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Good. I'm going to kick off in a minute or two. I'll just wait for a couple more people to step in.
Okay, Mark, I'm going to mute myself and hand over to you.
Okay, thanks, Nolan. Do you want to say anything by way of introduction to this cohort of sessions that we're going to have?
Thank you. Yes, I would. I'd like to start with thanking you, Mark, for doing these. We've come a long way together, and I think we're definitely developing the program as we go along, and it's just great to have you on board.
Thank you.
So Mark and I have set up 4 mentoring sessions, as you all know. You all have the links already, and it will go through the year. It has been built to build on each other, and I hope you get great value from it. So welcome to the new guys, and welcome to the guys from previous years, as well as to people that aren't actually on the GSSA mentoring program. So welcome, everyone.
Thanks, Nolan. And you're recording for people who may not be attending now.
I am, and it will go on to the GSSA YouTube channel. Thanks for the reminder, Mark.
Great. And what would be really nice, I think, is if just for a minute or so, everyone can put on their pictures. If we can see you all just for a minute, that's really cool. We can take a screenshot, and so that we see we're speaking with real people. That's really nice. I do recognize some names from previously. But maybe just if those of you who can just switch on your cameras for 30 seconds, that would be really great. Yeah. So let's do that now if it's possible. Oh, great, Tabo. Yeah, Shadrach. Jesse. Yeah. Good to see you guys. Any more pictures that we can see? Okay, I think you're all here. Boitumelo, yes, to me, that's great. Thank you. Okay. I'm just going to take a quick screenshot. That's okay. Yeah, thank you all for being here. Ravisha, yeah, nice to see you. Thanks for being here, guys. And we will work through until, normally this is about an hour and a half, up to 2 hours, so that we give you all a good chance to ask any questions, to respond to issues that you may like to bring. I will speak for the first half an hour, 40 minutes, something like that, and share some ideas and thoughts from my experience, and then we can open it up from there. And I look forward to working with you. So the first thing I would say is, just to be a little bit provocative, maybe, cigarettes and alcohol are not good for managing stress. So sometimes people who smoke tell me, oh, I really need to smoke because I'm so stressed at work, so I need to smoke. As if smoking helps them manage their stress. In fact, it's the other way around. The reason they are stressed very often is because they're smoking so much. So alcohol and cigarettes actually contribute to stress rather than help people to relieve it. But the smokers who are struggling to give up sometimes feel that it's the other way around, but it's not. And I think that's a really important thing to know. I'm not a doctor, but medical people will tell me that cigarettes contribute to stress. They don't help you to deal with stress. The reason you're stressed is partly because you're smoking. So that's just a thought for those of us who sometimes like to have a cigarette because we think it helps us to manage stress. No, it makes you more stressed. The other thing I would say is that, and I think this is a really important lesson, is that one of the greatest contributors to a long life and a healthy life is the quality of your personal relationships. Over and above exercise, diet, and all the other things that we hear about, the surveys and studies that they've done show that people who live longer are people who've got a good quality personal relationships around them. So this will be a theme that I talk about during our conversation today, is around personal relationships at work and outside work as well, is one of the best contributors to managing stress and living a longer life. It's actually correlated with the longer life. Good quality of personal relationships is number one on the list. Stress and burnout, which we're going to talk about today, is one of the biggest killers, actually. People who are stressed. It's a huge health issue. And I'll be talking about this not from particularly a medical perspective, but from my perspective working as a coach with people in the workplace, how to avoid it. When you get to the place where you are really stressed, it can become a mental health issue and requires some kind of therapeutic intervention. So I'm not going to focus on that, but my real focus is going to be on thinking about how to avoid getting into situations of stress and burnout in the workplace. Well, that's just by way of introduction. My name is Mark Turpin. I work as an executive coach, coaching people in the workplace, coaching individuals and teams. I also consult with organizations around teams, around managing conflict, and so on. I'm a mediator, trained, accredited mediator with conflict dynamics. So I work a lot with people in conflict. And also as a part-time lecturer at the Wits Business School around organizational learning. I'm a parent of twin sons who are in their 20s. One of them is a rapper, as some of you know, the other one is an artist. But it's helped teach me a lot about management and leadership, working with them, and helps to keep me in touch a little bit with how younger people navigating their way through the world of work are managing that process. It's challenging and difficult for young people these days. Many of them working in a kind of gig economy, where they have to go from one gig to another because they're not always working full-time in a business. And many people in the world of work these days are not going to spend their whole lives working for one company or in one profession, but will move around and develop a kind of portfolio of skills and experience that will enable them as professionals to manage their working lives. So that's a little bit about me. I love doing this kind of work, and I love working with people's questions, so don't be shy. If you want to raise your hand at any point or challenge me or respond to anything I'm saying, that's absolutely fine. It helps us focus on things that are really important. So our theme is really managing burnout and stress in the workplace and reflecting on why this is so important these days. There are a number of factors that give rise to a lot of stress and burnout in the workplace. I'm thinking about the huge demands that companies make on employees these days, change that is often happening in the workplace. So how people respond to and manage change can be very challenging. The complexity generally of work and the world of work, where people are expected to do lots of things rather than just one repetitive task. Very often untrained and unskilled managers who don't know how to support their teams. Sometimes conflict in the workplace, difficult working relationships can give rise to stress and sometimes burnout. And also there are sometimes factors from outside work that come in, difficult relationships with people, personal relationships, relationships outside of work, and sometimes financial issues that arise for people. People get into debt and so on. And those can also contribute a lot to the stress that people carry in the world of work. One of the things that is important in businesses these days is to create what they call psychological safety, where people feel safe to raise issues, to talk about things that are difficult or going wrong, and so on. So psychological safety is an important thing for managers and leaders to think about, how we create a culture and a workplace environment where it is safe and easy to bring up important issues. And also many of us work in businesses and places where there is no real psychological safety and people don't trust and don't feel comfortable and safe to raise issues. So it becomes important for us all as professionals to be able to really focus on how we manage our own stress and how we avoid burnout in the workplace, because these are real health issues. If we do it for no other reason, we have to do it for ourselves, even if we're not thinking about the needs of the wider business. I find in my coaching work with middle-aged or older professional people who have risen up the corporate ladder over the years, I find a huge amount of stress and burnout, and sometimes work with clients who are literally in tears in front of me as I speak with them about the stress and burnout they feel, with marriages that have broken up, disconnection with their children or relatives who they don't know how to talk to anymore, financial difficulties. Sometimes they get into taking pills and tablets to try and keep going. These are very successful people in many occasions who have done well at work, but they have prioritized work over almost everything else, spending long hours working for the business, but have neglected all the other important things that enable us to thrive as human beings, and things start to go wrong. And no one to talk to about it either, except me. And it's very late when people get to that stage and they've never had any kind of support or intervention to help themselves get out of that space. And my plea, my appeal to all of you as younger professionals, because I think most of you are at the younger end, is not to go there. Don't get into that situation. Don't work 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. Sorry, because it's not healthy for you and it takes you down that road. It takes you down that road, and it's much easier to avoid it in the first place and to put the things in place to manage stress even before you feel it, rather than to assume you're fine and then wake up one day in your 40s or 50s and find that everything has fallen apart and you didn't even realize it. It's much harder then to dig yourself out rather than take the important steps now to think about how you're going to manage stress in your life, because all of us in our working lives will have stressful times and events at different points that arise either from things going on in your personal life or arise from things going on at work. Every one of us will come across stressful times and events, and it's important to know how you are going to be able to carry yourself through those times in a resilient way and to emerge the other side sometimes older and wiser, or even a little bit sadder, but together and basically in one piece. It is so important to have those strategies lined up and to utilize them. So I just want to open it up very quickly and see if there's any responses to what I'm saying so far. Does it make sense? Any questions that come up for any of you? You can raise a hand. At different points, I'll stop and ask if anyone has any questions. It's good to see so many of you. Thank you for coming. Does it make sense? Can anyone give me a thumbs up or some indication as to whether I'm saying anything that's useful? Bhavisha, you're happy so far? Thank you. Tabo, you're comfortable. Shadrach, good. Okay. Let me then think about, in terms of moving into some of these personal strategies and ways of thinking that you can use for managing stress in the workplace. There's one chat, I just want to check. Yeah, Bhavisha, you're saying everything's fine. Thank you. It's useful to think of ourselves as holistic beings, as holistic people. We have lives that encompass sometimes a spiritual dimension. There's a mental well-being feeling that we have in our heads. We have a physical life. And we have to somehow think of ourselves as holistic beings that manage all of these things together simultaneously and that we don't neglect. So however we think of ourselves in a spiritual sense takes work and time, and we need to invest in our spiritual well-being. Sometimes people go to church. Sometimes people meditate. Whatever you do in a spiritual sense, it's a part of us, and we have to work on what we have to do to keep ourselves spiritually together and in touch with what's important in the world. And then we have a sort of mental well-being, how we think, how we relate, and how we connect with people around us. The relationship side, essentially, very important. And as I said at the beginning, those personal relationships are probably the greatest indicator of well-being and, in fact, long life as well. It's over and above all the other things that we can do, is invest in relationships with others at home and at work and in our communities and so on. There is also then, of course, the physical dimension of ourselves, which also needs attention. So all these different levels of our beings need continuing work and attention. And on the physical side, I'm talking about things like exercise, getting some sleep, thinking about diet, and all these things are important in terms of thinking about our physical well-being as well. And I wouldn't underestimate at all the point about sleep. Some of us need a little bit less sleep than others. Some of us need more sleep. But it is important to keep a regular sleep pattern as much as possible in terms of what is important for us, to be able to sleep well and to wake up feeling rested and ready for a day, is one of the really important things to think about, especially if there are things that are troubling you or stressing you out. The ability to be able to sleep well is important to focus on. So those dimensions of our physical lives, diet, exercise, sleep, to take up, and in that context, to give up some of the things that contribute to stress and burnout, the cigarettes that I spoke about, alcohol, keep to, you don't have to necessarily eliminate it, they say, but don't overindulge in some of these things if you can avoid it, even if the Springboks are winning, then to still not overindulge too much in alcohol is useful. So I'm talking there about spiritual, mental, physical dimensions of ourselves as human beings. And, you know, you can work on one level but neglect others. It's really important to try and think of yourself as having these different dimensions, spiritual, mental, physical dimensions that we exist in, and to give them all the kind of attention they need. And from now onwards, so not to wait until you are a little bit overweight to start thinking, oh, I must take up some exercise, but just to see that these things have to be, we have to work on ourselves on a continuing basis. On the physical side, even before coming into our meeting now, I did a 2-minute walk outside in the fresh air, drank some water, just to kind of clear my head and get myself in a good space for this conversation. And sometimes even doing something simple like that, breathing some fresh air and drinking a little bit of water and so on, to clear your head and keep yourself in a good space and ready for a difficult meeting or whatever comes next. Small little things that we can do to manage ourselves. So that's about how we manage ourselves as individuals, taking care of the spiritual, mental, physical dimensions of our lives. Any questions about that? You like it? Is it all obvious, or? Shadrach, you're comfortable so far? Dinilau, yeah, thank you. Jesse, good. You're all happy with what I'm saying. That's really nice. Don't be afraid to challenge me if you want. Thanks, Jesse. It's good. Don't be afraid to challenge me if you think that I'm being too precious or anything like that. It's okay. And I'm not saying that we all have to live a totally clean life always. It doesn't always work like that. But at least to be able to think of how we are managing ourselves in response to the pressures of the world is important. Okay, then one of the things I do want to talk about is this question of work-life balance. Work-life balance. A big thing people often talk about, but we don't often unpack completely what it means. Have any of you got any thoughts or reflections around work-life balance? Let me start by opening it up. What does it mean for any of you? I'm sure you work with this question. Mary Joy, sometimes difficult to balance everything. Find myself sometimes having to make trade-offs. Can you give me an example, Mary Joy, what you mean?
Hi, everyone.
Yes.
So what I mean is, for example, I'll have a routine that, starting off balancing everything, having my work my work done on time and everything, and having to exercise and eating healthy. But when one part now becomes maybe a bit challenging, for example, if I have now a lot of work, then I'll have to maybe sacrifice exercising.
Yeah.
So that's the trade-off that I'm talking about. So then now it doesn't balance anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah. So but what I find is that, what I have to do is to basically calm down and just try to get back to trying to balance everything out again. So it's basically a cycle where when I find myself losing the balance, I have to now get back to calming down and seeing how I can start over the cycle.
Yeah. It's not always easy,
Mm.
especially if you're breaking or stepping out of a kind of pattern that has been working for you. It's not always easy if it stops and then you have to try and get back into it again. Sometimes we just give up on the exercise every week or whatever we do, because other things are just sort of taking over, and it's much harder to get back into it again than afterwards. Some of it comes down to how we manage time. How we manage time, how much time we spend at work. And one of the things I sometimes encourage people to do is to put together some kind of, it's usually a circle on a flip chart, dividing up your week into different blocks of time. How much time do you spend sleeping? How much time do you spend going out in the evenings? How much time do you spend at work? How much time do you sit at home watching TV or whatever? And to break it down and look at, we've got 168 hours in a week. Some of it automatically, a big chunk of it does go on sleep, and a big chunk of it goes on work. And how much is it if we are truthful and honest with ourselves? And how do we break up that 168 hours? Just to do that, if each of us do it, it can be really revealing as a kind of guide to maybe what shifts you want to make. Do you want to spend a bit more time doing more quality life type activities? Do you need to cut back on some of the working hours and so on? So if you're not sure how you're dividing up your time, it's a really good exercise to do for yourself on a whiteboard or a flip chart. You'll just break down your 168 hours into how you actually spend it. It's a good idea to reflect on that and think about any changes you might want to make. Very often, the work hours need to be cut down. Very often. And there's even a move in some places, and even in South Africa, to start thinking about the idea of a 4-day week rather than a 5-day week. Because a lot of research is showing that in 4 days, people will often achieve as much on the work front as they would in 5. They're just using that work time more efficiently. And productivity levels don't usually deteriorate for a business if people are working 4 days rather than 5. So it's certainly true that in a day, once you start working more than 8 hours in a day, many of us do, your productivity is not necessarily in the 9th and 10th hours anything like what it is in the other hours of the day. So the extra hours generally do not add much to overall productivity. And yeah, why do we work such long hours? Because not really useful for the business, not really useful for us as people. So I do encourage people to try and sometimes cut down their working hours to a kind of manageable level. And of course, the other thing is that in addition to actually the hours spent at work, many of us spend a lot of time every week just traveling to and from work. in the car, in a stressful environment where driving is stressful, especially in rush hour times. So I also encourage people, wherever possible, it's not always possible for everyone, but wherever possible, to try and minimize time spent sitting in traffic, going to and from work. And that can be done in a number of ways, sometimes by avoiding rush hours, if it's possible, to have some flexi time at work so that you can travel to and from work outside of the busy rush hour times, can save time and reduce stress. If it's possible, also very often people are able to work at home at least sometimes, maybe not every single day, but maybe if there's a day or two that you can work from home instead of the office, then you can save some travel time every week doing that. It has many advantages in terms of managing stress, saving some time. I mean, I sometimes talk to people who are spending 3 hours a day sitting in traffic, getting to and from the office, 15 hours a week in rush hours. You save time, you save stress, you reduce actually your petrol expenditure as well. If you can negotiate or arrange to work from home or in a co-working space closer to home, or whatever it happens to be. And it's not, as I say, it's not always possible for everybody to do that. But if it is possible, and if your company allows you to work sometimes from home or from another space, that can be very valuable. And many companies now are looking at hybrid working as a way, firstly, of working well with their employees, but they also sometimes can reduce rental costs for their business or their offices or whatever, because they don't need so much physical space every day if 20% of the staff are working from home on any given day on average. And so that can also support some kind of work-life balance. So managing time and thinking about how you manage your time is really important. And in that context, I suppose this is where investing time in the quality of your personal relationships is so important, so important. And I'd encourage all of you to think carefully about how you do this. And you don't build a personal relationship easily by just flopping in front of the TV always in the evenings with your partner or girlfriend or boyfriend or whoever it is. Simply just spending time flopped in front of the TV does not necessarily build or strengthen a personal relationship. So investing time in those relationships is important, but with that, to really think about the quality of the relationship, the conversations you have that can strengthen those relationships is so incredibly valuable. And it takes continuing work. It takes continuing work every week, every month, every year, to invest time and energy and effort into the personal relationships that are important to us. And again, some of the people that I was speaking about earlier, the ones who come to me in tears, who have neglected the relationships with their partners. And I sometimes ask them, when was the last time you took your partner or your wife or your husband on a date? When was the last time? And sometimes they tell me it's 10 years ago. So they have completely neglected their most important personal relationship. And sometimes when that happens, one partner wakes up and decides that the person they are living with is no longer the person they were attracted to 20 or 30 years ago. And they want out. And it can happen out of the blue. It's like a switch that goes off on sometimes for people. That everything seemed to be all right one day, and then the next day there's nothing left. So because nobody's been investing in that relationship, and it was taken for granted, and everybody was assuming everything is okay. So it's really important to continually invest in the relationships that are important to you. I can't emphasize that enough. And as I said earlier, this is correlated with longevity, with the long life, and with health and well-being. It's the quality of our relationships. It's surprising to hear that. I talk about giving up cigarettes and alcohol and so on. More important than giving up cigarettes is to invest in the quality of your personal relationships, health-wise. Sorry. The doctors don't usually tell you that, but this is completely true. Questions or thoughts?
Mark Botemelo has a question. Is it possible to achieve the ultimate balance, though?
Is it
That was a
possible
while
to...
ago.
Oh, yes, I see. Is it possible to achieve the ultimate balance? Good question. I'm not quite sure, but I think it's important to think about those different areas that need attention. The spiritual dimension, mental and physical dimensions of health and well-being, exercise, diet, sleep, and investing in those quality relationships. All these things are important, and finding a balance in which they are all somewhere on the scale is important. If we neglect any of them, then you're not going to achieve a balance. Sometimes we take on additional stress in our lives, and we make sacrifices and compromises for the sake of, you might get a job that is very attractive in many ways, but requires more travel time. And you might decide in conversation with your partner that you're going to take that on and acknowledge the fact that there's a price to be paid, but it may not be forever. So the important thing is to be consciously aware of the need for some kind of balance and to manage it as best we can. So I don't think there's an ultimate balance, but I think thinking through the different aspects that I've talked about is important in seeking, maybe it's a question of continually seeking some kind of balance that works best for you. And not to neglect and never think about some of these areas, because they are all important. I don't think there's an ultimate balance necessarily. You've got to do what works best for you. But I see people my age who look 20 years older, people I studied with a long time ago, who are old, retired, and doing nothing with their lives. And they're gray and haggard and tired. And I think they look 20 years older than me, but they're my age. And that's very sad when you see people like that. People who are almost old before their time. That shows that something has gone wrong, I think. So managing time is important. Thinking about best possible balance. Thanks for the question. Yeah. No ultimate balance, but work on it and don't neglect particular areas. Other questions? You're all good. I hope this is helpful. A couple of other things to think about. One is, even when you are away from work, away from your workplace, or your working day is formally over or officially over, people are still keeping in touch on cell phones, work calls and messages are still coming, people are still working on their laptops to answer their emails. And I do encourage people not to do that as much as possible. Sometimes people feel they need to be, people need to be able to contact them, or that they're on call or something like that. I understand. But if it's possible not to do work messages on your phone after working hours, because mostly the questions that are coming can be dealt with in the morning anyway. There's very little that has to be dealt with at 10 o'clock at night. And it's another thing that contributes to our health and well-being, is to know when not to use this, to switch this off, put it away, put it on silent, stop checking your emails at a certain time. And this will also help you to sleep better as well. They've shown that one of the things you don't want to do is be checking your cell phone or your emails just before you go to sleep. Better to listen to some quiet music or read a book or something to get you into a headspace for preparing to sleep and to sleep well, and not to be disturbed by the message that came through at 10:30 at night. So I think managing social media is, managing your media generally on your laptop or your cell phone is an important part of finding work-life balance, because it's too easy to be always available and the one who's always going to respond, even if it's not immediately urgent at the time. You don't get extra brownie points from any business by always being available. You don't get extra brownie points from the business for working 10 hours instead of 8, usually. There's no reward, even if companies sometimes expect it. They've shown that around the world, people are spending hundreds of thousands, probably millions of extra hours for businesses without any compensation or reward. Hundreds of thousands of hours, which people are giving to their business because they think somehow that it's going to be good for their careers or whatever. Those people get retrenched just as quickly as anybody else, I can promise you. There's no extra reward, and people are investing all that extra time because they think that somehow they're going to benefit from it. And it's very sad when they realize that the fact that they spent all those extra hours didn't buy them any brownie points when it came to the retrenchment list. You get retrenched just as quickly. I'm not saying companies are always evil, but sometimes there is a time when they need to retrench people, and this doesn't come into the equation. All those extra days that you spent, not part of the formula for deciding who gets retrenched later. So don't do it, and switch off your cell phones and put your laptops away. And so I'm also telling myself the same. I also have to learn to do these things sometimes. But manage your media well is an important part of that managing your time, actually, and having respect for your own time and what's important for you, as well as respect sometimes for the company. So it's about doing both, and again, finding a good balance. Exercise is something that I think is one of the things that gets cut. As we were saying earlier, try to maintain some kind of exercise routine, even if it means getting up a bit earlier because you're sleeping well. These things are important. So try and keep some kind of exercise routine. It doesn't matter if it's yoga or balancing classes or spinning on a bike or whatever you do, but some kind of exercise will also help you feel better. And it's a good way to start the day. Sometimes getting up an hour earlier, spending half an hour in the gym, if possible, or just doing some stretching exercises at your home can also be very valuable. What else would I say? I think one of the other things that can be incredibly valuable for people in the world of work is to have someone who could be a coach or a mentor or someone who can support you in thinking through your own growth and development at work, thinking through sometimes some difficult relationships that you might have with colleagues. Every good professional person these days needs some kind of coaching support in their working lives. This is new because it used to be in the past that coaching was always seen as some kind of remedial process. When things go wrong or when there's a performance issue, we'd send somebody to get coached in how to improve their performance. But no longer is it just a remedial process. Now it's an important factor in thinking about the support that professionals need in the world of work for all the reasons that I spoke about earlier, the complexity of work, difficult managers sometimes, heavy workloads, and sometimes conflict that arises, having to manage change if there's restructuring and so on. Someone who is a coach can be really useful in terms of supporting you to manage those situations effectively. I'm just looking at your question. Do I suggest getting a coach internally or even outside could work to some extent? You know, sometimes it's good to have a coach from outside, but it's often useful to have somebody who has some kind of understanding of your working environment or context. A coach internally can sometimes be more difficult, but having a good mentor inside the company can also be very helpful. Somebody who can help you navigate some of the organizational dynamics. But having someone outside can often give you a safer space to explore difficult workplace relationships without any of the sort of confidentiality issues arising if you had an internal person. So make a choice. I think the important thing is to find a good person, whether you know it's internal or external, someone who you can work with on a confidential basis and who has your back, someone who's going to support you to make the right choices and decisions. Yeah, I hope that's helpful. You know, even some of the top performers in the world of sport have coaches, someone like Usain Bolt, who is the top 100 meters runner in the world, had a team of coaches working with him. None of them could, of course, run nearly as fast as he could. But he had a team of coaches working with him because his challenge was always to get out of the blocks quickly. And if you look at videos of his 100-meter runs, you'll see after 20 meters, he was usually behind the other runners. And only in the final part of the race would he overtake them. And his challenge was how to get out of the blocks more quickly. And he had a team of coaches working with him to support him to improve how he could do that. So coaching has long been accepted as important for sports performers, sports athletes, top sporting professionals have coaches as a matter of course. And increasingly, it's going to become a matter of course for people in the workplace, for professionals who want to continually improve, even if they're good and even if they're at the top of their game, to continually improve their performance. So having a coach, I think, is really valuable. Yeah, with relationships at work, generally, I spoke about the importance of personal relationships, so important, but also to have good relationships with working colleagues. Sometimes you can find supportive working colleagues around you, and often we find difficult relationships with colleagues as well. So thinking about how to manage those effectively, again, a coach can support you with that kind of thing. And as much as possible to not be alone in your working environment, because sometimes people cut themselves off from colleagues who might be challenging or difficult. And you build up stress if you keep all the workplace headaches to yourself. So finding good colleagues at work who can support you, who can be sometimes a shoulder to cry on, or whatever you need to fix a difficult issue. Sometimes somebody in the next cubicle has worked on exactly your issue. And if only you had reached out and spoken to them, they could have given you the answers that you were looking for, or referred you to somebody else who could. So usually in your network, there are people who are willing to support you. So yeah, don't be alone at work. We spend a lot of time there. And it's good to find good connections and good relationships with the people that we meet every day. So don't neglect the importance of that, I think I would say. Well, I've been speaking for quite a long time now. Yeah, let me maybe open it up now and see what other questions people have. I've covered quite a lot of ground. Anything that is particularly striking or that raises any questions for any of you?
Mark, if I could just ask,
Yeah.
it would be really interesting to see how many people on the call are actually feeling stressed and burnt out. Maybe just raise your hands.
Yeah. How many of you do feel stressed or burned out? Don't be shy. Yeah. Yeah, a few of you. Yeah, a few of us do feel stressed and burned out. I wonder what the main cause is. Would any of you like to share what you feel the main cause is of your stress or burnout? To me, what do you think?
I think
Yeah.
most people right now, it's year-end fatigue. I think it's been a long year, so the system and the body is starting to cave in, and it's getting warmer and warmer as well. So that's also contributing to the fatigue. Yeah.
Yeah, so the time of year can be, again, stressful. You've had a long year, you can't quite see the end of it yet. I'm looking
Yes.
forward to getting some kind of break.
Yeah, that's true. And also because in our private lives, we are also going through different things. So that's also contributing to the way we feel at this time of the year.
Yeah. Lavisha?
Hi. I think it's the inability to find balance that can also be stressful.
Yeah. Struggling to find that balance. I think maybe a good starting point is to do that circle on a flip chart and try and divide up your 168 hours and just look at it for a while and think about what could be the big change that you could make, or even a small change to free up a bit of time. So maybe that's a good starting point. Dinalauya as well, you asked a question here around finding a coach. How does one find a mentor or a coach? Struggling to find one. Well, you can find lists of coaches on the internet for South African coaches. If you are really struggling and you think you have some particular needs, you could, through Nolene, perhaps get in touch with me and I'll see if I can recommend someone. I have a group of coaches that I'm working with. So we can maybe help you to find someone. Sandile, your question around dealing with unreasonable colleagues who make your job difficult to do. That's, yeah, an interesting question. Dealing with colleagues, I said some of them can be supportive and some of them can be difficult. And I think it's very valuable to find, if some colleagues are unreasonable or difficult, to see if you can find some who are more reasonable. Some people around you that you do have good relationships with. And you could talk about it with them and see if there's something you can do, or if they have something that they could advise you. I think sometimes as well, it's good to, if there's somebody who's been particularly unreasonable, and if it's possible, just to ask them why they are behaving in such a way towards you. If we've done anything wrong, or is there anything you can change to improve things? Sometimes just talking about the issue with the right person can be a good start. I don't know if that helps a little bit. Sandile, what do you think? Or do you want to say a bit more about that? The question is, who is the right person? Yeah. I think I would try, if possible, to avoid making it an issue with a manager or supervisor and a complaint. So that would be a kind of, I think, a last resort. Try and find a colleague at the same level, if possible, someone who you feel you can trust, and just say, look, I'm really struggling with these other colleagues because talk through the situation with them and see what they recommend and what they advise, because they know the context. If you are still struggling, then sometimes it's good to get an outside advisor, or again a coach or someone who could maybe help you think it through. But I think don't neglect it. It's a good thing to try and find some kind of way through the situation you're experiencing. Debbie, you speak about understaffed situations. Workload explodes. Becomes a conversation that I think is good to have with a manager or supervisor in terms of how can we best manage this. Not so much making it a complaint, but try and introduce a problem-solving conversation. How can we best manage the situation of understaffing? So that you're not blaming anyone or seeking a conflict, but going into a sort of problem-solving mode as much as possible. Lots of issues come up. So, many of the things you're describing are the symptoms of the workplace issues that arise. And it's very difficult to do much about them because they exist and they will continue to exist. And if you don't have any at the moment, new ones will come in the future. So those issues will come and they will exist. And I guess part of what I'm trying to say is that in that context, when work is difficult and the working environment is difficult, having these strategies that we've been talking about is going to better place you to manage the challenges that inevitably come. You're not going to solve every problem, but you will be better placed to cope, to be resilient, and to come through some of the challenges, if that makes any sense. Yeah. Nolene, is that helpful? You asked for people to raise their hands a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Thoughts and questions, other thoughts or questions? The question of finding a coach, I think, is an important one. And if anybody does need, I could maybe even provide a short list of some coaches to Nolene that you can have Nolene as a resource for people who need some kind of coaching support. It may just be to have one person to answer a question or to give you some advice on a very specific issue, and may not even need to become a sort of longer term coaching relationship, but someone who can at least give you some good advice. And I could provide a short list of a few people, Nolene, if that's helpful, that people could draw on.
I think that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, other questions? Do many of you people feel that you are doing these things anyway, or are there some new intentions that start to come from what we've been talking about? You all feel you're doing all of the things we've been talking about.
I
Guys,
think we
don't-
know that we should be doing it, but are we doing it?
Are you doing it? Yeah. Probably a lot of the things that I'm saying that, yeah, as Debbie, as you say, it's stuff that we know, but don't always put into practice. It seems sometimes that people put these things in place when suddenly something happens or something goes wrong and they feel, oh, I need to take up some exercise or I need to do this or that. And I think the plea that I mentioned earlier, the important point is don't wait. Don't wait until things seem to go wrong or something needs attention before you put in place the kind of things we've spoken about. Bavisha, does that make sense? Did you raise your hand?
Yes, I think maybe one of the things that come up for me is that I think the younger generation, we do sort of prioritize mental health. But maybe it's not taken as seriously by our older colleagues. And that can also be a challenge. So how do we navigate something like that?
It's really important because you all will move into the positions that they are in, and you see how they lead and how they manage. And very often they are making a lot of the mistakes that they inherited. And it's really important not to inherit the bad habits, sometimes working long hours or whatever it is, or making huge demands on other people. And don't take on the bad habits that you see from your more senior managers or colleagues. But to really, if you are prioritizing the important things in life, to continue to do that and not just to do what other people seem to do because they are older or more senior than you. Because, I am picking up the pieces from a lot of those older colleagues where things have gone wrong. They don't tell you about it, but I've seen the challenges that those people face. So, don't go there. If that's my singular message for today. Don't let yourself get into that situation because you followed what you seem to think that the other senior managers or leaders in your business were doing and that it's successful. Not necessarily. Dinilau, yes. What do you say?
I was trying to unmute myself there.
Yes.
On the point of where the young ones understand and know mental health, while the older colleagues, being us now, sort of being black, you sort of to say you know the term mental health, but you sort of are ignorant to the science, in the sense that the way you were brought up, you weren't raised in an awareness of mental health per se. So mental health, when obviously back then or in the ages that we were raised, was associated with the mind. As the well-being of the mind, where you are associated to behaviors. If you say you are not mentally well, you are going gogos, as if you are like ill, you need to go lie in a hospital, stuff like that. But October being a mental health awareness month, this is where we are made aware that it's not how you feel, how your mind is. It's basically how all these things around you affect your well-being, and at the end it affects your mind, the stress level, your sort of finance, the amount of workload you have, or all of that, how you sum it up together now, just come up and then cluster, and at the end your body and your mind can't handle it anymore. You become mentally exhausted.
Yes.
So the young ones will know that because they are raised, or they basically in the era that they are growing up is an era where awareness is basically there. People are made aware of what mental health is and what contribute, and how can one go about to try and reduce cases around mental health, which is depression, and the list goes on. But as the older ones, we are learning now, and I think every year or month, there will be changes on how we will look into this mental health signs, or when the young one come up and say, I need a holiday, I'm exhausted, not to point it towards laziness or stuff in that way, but to understand that yes, they are exhausted and they are burnt out, they need to go rest.
Rest is so important, and I'm glad you mentioned that. I mean, mental health matters, and one of the messages that I'm picking up from what I've seen this month around mental health is address it earlier rather than later. Address it earlier rather than later. So don't wait until you really feel you've got a big mental health issue, because then already it's late and can be harder to address. The other thing I would say, you mentioned about taking leave. In addition to all those extra days, weeks, and months that people are working for the company, so many companies are carrying huge amounts of untaken leave every year from employees who are just not taking leave that they're entitled to because of overwork, or they feel the company can't afford to see them missing for a period of time. I think it's very good, and I would encourage all of you at the beginning of the year, beginning of 2024, to make a leave plan for yourself. If necessary, you submit it through to HR or whoever, but to plan different times in the year when you're going to take a day's leave or a week's leave or whatever. And even if the plan changes in the course of the year, that's okay. But to at least have some kind of plan as to when you're going to take the 20 days or whatever it is you're entitled to, which is over a day a month, obviously, nearly 2 days a month on average. So to plan when you're going to take it. And if you haven't taken a single day by the time you get to April or May, it's already becoming a problem, because leave is there for the benefit of employees. And it's good to utilize it and to make sure that when you get to the end of the year, you've taken most of your leave and that you're not carrying 2 or 3 weeks leave over and into the following year. It's not good for the company, but also not good for you to be carrying all this untaken leave. So I think it is there to use. And even if you schedule a day's leave in March and you take it, and if you spend the day kicking around in the garden or taking your kids to school or whatever it happens to be, it's good. It doesn't have to mean that you have to go to Cape Town or anything like that. Even if you just stay at home, extra day on the weekend or something like that, it's really important, again, just as a way of managing stress and burnout. And the company will still be there on Tuesday morning. And they will still have issues they want you to deal with, obviously. But the place will not have burned down. The company will not have crashed in your absence. It'll still be there. So do make a leave plan and schedule some leave throughout the year, different points. And then as much as possible, take it. Even if you change the actual dates at a later point, that's okay. Questions? How many of you are carrying lots of leave on your book? Let's just see from thumbs up if you're carrying a lot of leave. Debbie, yeah, carrying. How much leave are you carrying, Debbie? Do you even know?
Currently in the middle 20s.
Yeah. Take some leave, even in October, take a day's leave.
I've just come back from 11 days in Lesotho. Join a 4x4 club and go for long drives.
Yeah. Guys, could we take 2-minute leg stretch? Would that be all right? And then we'll reconvene in maybe 2 or 3 minutes and get a glass of water or something like that. And then I'd like to reflect on what we learn, what we take out of our session today. Is that okay?
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, let's take a 2-minute leg stretch. Thanks. Okay, thanks everyone. I was able to get my glass of water. I'd just like to maybe reflect for a few minutes just on some of the things you want to take out, some of the learnings you want to take out of our conversation this afternoon. Or if there's one or two things you want to do differently or take up in terms of managing your lives and the stress and avoiding burnout and so on. Yeah, so maybe we can just ask each of you to volunteer something that you're going to do differently going forward. You can raise your hands. Don't be shy.
I'm going to start by taking the afternoon off.
Oh, okay. That's good. Sometimes, yeah, just on the spur of the moment, take out some time is really cool. I hope each of you can make that leave plan at the beginning of the year. Try and get human resources to approve it if possible. The good companies should be asking for a leave plan from everybody. Bhavisha says, stay more committed to exercise. Yeah, you don't have to do Iron Man or Iron Woman or anything like that. You don't have to feel that you're going to be a top athlete. But even walking around the block once or twice a week can be incredibly valuable in terms of improving blood circulation, getting the blood to your heart and brain, stimulating the muscles a little bit. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but even doing something small, regular physical exercise can be incredibly valuable and actually helps you feel better when you arrive at the office. For me, I find doing it in the morning is best at the beginning of the day, even if you have to get up a little bit earlier. Doesn't mean you have to drive to a gym or anything like that necessarily. But even just walking around the garden or walking around the corner, around the block for 10, 15 minutes, incredibly valuable. Walking is one of the best forms of exercise. Shadrach, meeting up with friends more often. So important because this is about quality of personal relationships and takes investment. Don't just assume that the people will always be there. Things happen in people's lives. But to keep in touch with people, keep those relationships alive, meeting up with friends can be incredibly valuable. And you're allowed to have a drink when you do that if you want to. So yeah, meeting up with friends. Quality of personal relationships, number one indicator for longevity, for a long life, which is fascinating to know that it's better than giving up cigarettes and all these other things you can do. Quality of personal relationships. There's been a waking up a bit earlier than usual. Yeah, sometimes you have to go to bed half an hour earlier. Switch off your laptop. Not spending so much time just chilling out in front of the TV or whatever it is. Go to bed a bit earlier, wake up a bit earlier. It's light from 5 o'clock in the morning. It's already light. So you can get going. Walk around the block. Thank you. It's actually simple things. These things don't cost money. It's just about thinking about your time and thinking about yourself as being important. And if you're thinking about yourself as being important, then you will also be important for other people as well. But it has to start with oneself. Yeah. Other thoughts, reflections, things you want to do, intentions. Nonopa, we haven't heard from you. How are you finding the conversation? What do you think? Donald, are you with us still? Guys, don't be shy. You can put into the chat if you want, people. I can certainly say that from my perspective, two things have been particularly important. Obviously, relationships. We spent a lot of time speaking about that. Also, the exercise, taking up regular exercise. I sit on a spinning bike 2 or 3 times a week for an hour or so. That's incredibly valuable. Helps me feel really good. So for my recommendation is always invest in the relationships, work relationships and personal relationships, and the exercise. On the relationships side, being part of a book club has been really good for me. I'm part of a boys' book club that meets once a month. We sometimes talk about books. But interestingly enough, one of the things that is really great about that meeting that we have is that we laugh a lot. There's a lot of humor, a lot of sense of humor, a lot of jokes. Sometimes it's a little bit testosterone filled, but the opportunity to spend time laughing with people is incredibly valuable. And they say laughter is a really good form of release as well. And in that 2 or 3 hours that we spend together, it really enables us to put things out of our minds, put other problems away, and just focus on the moment and the fun that we're having together. Bhavisha, thanks very much for being in the session today. Yeah, hope to see you next time. Any other final reflections? Any thoughts, any good intentions that you want to take out from today? You're all covered, I think. I hope you've all enjoyed the session and take something really useful out of it. It's great to connect with you all. I look forward very much to our next session. Nolene, I think we're kind of coming to an end, so I don't know if you want to say some final words.
No, Mark, I agree. Thank you very much for your time today. As always, it has been valuable. I see Butamela is going to exercise a little bit more, and she's bought home gear. Well done.
That's really good.
From our side, when I get stressed or I feel stuck behind my computer, I do a quick 5-minute yoga session, and I find that always helps, especially the upside down poses.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, Mark, thank you. Everybody, thank you for joining us today. I find it very valuable, and I hope you have too. And we'll see you in a couple of months' time.
Great. Thanks, everybody, and look after yourselves and be good to yourselves. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Mark. Bye.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Right, I'm going to end now. Thanks, Mark.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.